Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from in the US, in Europe, or around the world. My name is Sam Greene. I'm director of the Democratic Resilience Program at the Center for European Policy Analysis here in Washington, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this rapid reaction discussion of the impact and aftermath of the Nova Kakhovka Dam destruction. We've watched in horror the destruction of the Nova Kakhovka Dam, the flooding of countless villages, towns, and cities, the loss of life, adding to the grim tally of Russia's illegal and already brutal war in Ukraine. The destruction of the dam on June 6 led to the flooding of some 600 square kilometers of land, the evacuation of thousands of civilians, and an uncertain number of fatalities. Russia, meanwhile, has weaponized the chaos, deliberately attacking evacuation and rescue efforts and slowing the progress of Ukraine's counteroffensive. The impact of the destruction of the dam, however, is far greater than just the local and immediate consequences. To help us unpack the military, human, and economic, and environmental and geostrategic implications of this atrocity, we are joined today really by an excellent panel. Joining us from Ukraine is Dr. Hanna Shelest, non-resident senior fellow in the Transatlantic Defense and Security Program here at SIPA, as well as director of security programs at Ukrainian Prism and editor-in-chief of Ukraine Analytica. As well, we have Olya Korbut, a democracy fellow in residence with us here in the Democratic Resilience Program at SIPA, and an analyst on sanctions and at the Black Sea Institute of Strategic Studies, again in Ukraine. And last but not least, Ambassador Kurt Volker, distinguished fellow at SIPA, who served as U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations 2017-2019, and U.S. Ambassador to NATO from 2008 to 2009. We'll do a quick round of the panel to get the conversation started in that order, but I would note for those of you who are joining us online and live that you can ask questions. There should be a link up on your screen to the Slido tool, but you can go to sli.do/SIPA, that's sli.do/SIPA, to ask questions, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can as this conversation continues. But to start us off, let me hand the floor to Dr. Shelest. Hanna, what should we be paying attention to at the moment when it comes to the dam?
Thank you very much, Sam, for the introduction and for the timely discussion that we have today. Probably the first thing that we really need to pay attention, that is the problem of complexity. That usually in the news, you see either the humanitarian side of the tragedy, a little bit of the economic side, or the military. Was it worse of doing this or something like this? And just few of those who are really looking at this situation in complex. And that is from what I would like to start. Because definitely the question number one that we are trying to answer, did Russia gain anything from this explosion? Will it slow down Ukrainian counteroffensive? Will it influence the Ukrainian counteroffensive or not? And that is the issue that we definitely have over here. As to now, we see that it doesn't have the significant changes, because looks like the main target points being more on the east, on the northeast of the country, rather than on the south. And the latest liberated villages are in that direction. But still, definitely, we need to understand all those consequences and how that can influence the liberation of the Kherson region, which is so close. And now the heavy military, for example, equipment will not be able for some time to reach those points. It doesn't mean that it will prevent the counteroffensive in that direction. It's just the slowing down, because this summer, and if the weather is sunny, definitely the drying of the land is happening much quicker than we would speak, for example, in autumn. But we can speak more about the military, like why it was beneficial for Russians or why Russians did it. The second group of consequences are definitely the pure humanitarian consequences. That is all that tragedy, all those De facto, it is a war crime. And let's be honest, according to the Geneva Conventions, it is prohibited to blow up the dams. And especially when you have 80 settlements over there, you saw all these tragic pictures. Will you have the first numbers about dead people? And here, the humanitarian situation, we need to emphasize two things. One, it is the general consequences of all those people trapped, left without fresh water, without their houses, without their belongings, needed to be evacuated. But also the problem is that Russians are not doing the evacuation from the villages at their controlled territories. And we already have a problem, first of all, that a lot of dead corpses are reported visible by the drones, for example, but we cannot do anything because Russians are not doing the evacuation. But even those who tried to be evacuated to the Ukrainian controlled territories, or at least further, are not allowed. We already had several cases of people being shooted till the death just in their backs, or the cases that people are allowed to leave the flooded places only in case they have Russian passports. So that is the clear case of the war crimes, of division of the people in these situations. And we can go further with all the stories and details. And the third group, it is the social economic consequences of this, because the flooded lands, it is first of all the total degradation of the agriculture, and this region is agricultural. So we can speak about the long-term consequences for the crops, for the food security, for the all other agricultural products that be produced in this region, tomatoes, watermelons. We're speaking about not a really big amount of all these products that will have impact not only for Ukraine. We're speaking about the absence of water for the amelioration and in general for the agriculture, not only at the flooded territories, but at all the south of Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, because they dependent on the water that's been coming from the Kakhovka electric station. And we're speaking about the water necessary for the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant for the cooling of the occupied nuclear power plant. And we are speaking about the water that's been delivered from this Kakhovka hydroelectric station to the other metallurgical manufacturing within that region. So if we already speak about the military and humanitarian consequences, we are now just starting talking about the social economic consequences, how it will change the economy of the social well-being, of the food security, not only of the region affected, but of Ukraine. And let's be honest, not only of Ukraine, because food security, that's the issue that will be, or nuclear security, that's the issue that will go far beyond the borders of Ukraine.
Thank you, Hanna, for that. There's a lot to unpack there, and we'll get into much of it. But let me hand over for the moment to Olya to also broaden out the scope a bit in the Black Sea context.
Yes, thank you, and good morning to everyone. So we can only roughly imagine the economic, ecological, and human losses from the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam by Russians. And we will get a real shock when the water level will become lower, which will take up around 10 to 14 days in some flooded areas. So we will see the consequences of this catastrophe not only in Ukraine, but also in other Black Sea countries. As a result of the destruction of the dam, a giant toxic wave is flowing down the Dnipro River into the Black Sea. Thousands of tons of chemicals, poisonous soils, long-term silt with heavy metals, sewage waste, washed away cemeteries, and cattle burial grounds. All these toxins, infections, pathological microbes will pour into the Black Sea and will continue to grow up there. The significant changes in the chemical composition of seawater samples have already been recorded in the waters of the Black Sea near the coast of Odessa. As the water there moves counterclockwise, Romania, Bulgaria, and even Turkey might be next who will face the consequences of that. But ecologists might say much more about this, and we are basing these views on the data we have now. But we still have an occupied nuclear power plant that was pulled from the Kakhovka reservoir, as Hanna said previously. And now there are serious problems with cooling. Plus, the station is full of monkeys with grenades. The nuclear power in Zaporizhia in Enerhodar is the largest one in Europe. Imagine the consequences of leaking at least a small portion of radiation from it. It will absorb into the water and go downstream into the Black Sea. Blowing up the Kakhovka Dam is, first of all, using nuclear weapon by Russia without the formal using of nuclear weapon. There is a famous Russian saying, so do not get RU to anyone. When Russians leave the occupied territories, they destroy everything behind them. They remove all equipment from factories, take away light bulbs, toilets, second-hand shoes, etc. Everything that can be removed and taken away, they will take it away. In addition to this, they will burn forests, they will destroy all infrastructure, blow up all existing tanks with toxic substances. I'm talking about the future of Crimea now. It is known from anonymous sources that now all the equipment of the T10 plant, everything related to the production of titanium dioxide, is being taken out now. What remains there is amorphous, a highly explosive substance, and a settlement lake for long-term waste from the production of titanium dioxide. There is a high possibility that Russians will use it as a chemical bomb. Therefore, both Ukraine and other Black Sea countries should prepare to eliminate the consequences of this in the Black Sea. And as Hanna said earlier, I will also add that the huge irrigation system of the agrarian south of Ukraine has been lost. Therefore, this year's already meager export of the Ukrainian harvest will be in even more difficult situation. And it's in long-term perspective that's not only for 1 year. And I want to emphasize also that there are a lot of constructions in media, like the dam is damaged, the dam has collapsed, as if the dam collapsed by itself. But this catastrophe has an author, it's Russia. And Russia is responsible for what happened. And this is not just a flood. No natural flood can be compared to the level of the disaster the residents of Kherson region are facing now. And the Kakhovka Dam was blown up by Russia. Thank you.
Thank you, Olya. Again, a lot to pick up on there, so we'll come back to that. I would also remind people again that you can go online to the link on your screen, sly.do/SIPA, to ask questions for the panel. But before that, let me hand over to Ambassador Volker. Kurt, help us see this in an even broader geostrategic perspective.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Sam. And I think both Hanna and Olga made excellent points. And so I'll repeat a few of them, as well as maybe put it in a little bit of context. The overall picture here is that Russia is becoming aware that it is losing the war. They are not able to advance on the ground. They exhausted themselves in the last-ditch effort at Bakhmut. They have resorted to just shelling Ukrainian cities, missiles and drone strikes on Ukrainian cities, because they're not able to do much else. And Ukraine, meanwhile, has prepared a very capable force, well-trained, well-equipped, in order to launch these counteroffensives that we're now seeing. So it's in advance of and anticipating Ukrainian counteroffensives that Russia went ahead and blew up the dam. And the purpose of this is to flood the area below the dam, meaning that Ukrainian forces, even if they were thinking about transiting or crossing the Dnipro River south of the dam, will no longer be able to consider that as an option, at least for a long period of time. This will then channel any Ukrainian forces to go east, north of the dam. Now, as Hanna said, this is still not that significant. But the Ukrainian forces are already east of the Dnipro River, north of the dam, and they're fighting on the front lines in Donbass and protecting Kharkiv. And the main efforts seem to be probing right now, using only about 25% of the force. They are the new forces. They are not deploying all of their new forces yet. They're probing in the east and they're probing in the south from central Ukraine east of the Dnieper River. So the fact that the Russians did this, yes, there is a military purpose to it, but at the same time, it's not that significant militarily. It is, as Olga said, a humanitarian and an ecological disaster, and a man-made one done by the Russians for no good reason. And people will point out, in order to sow confusion, that, oh, well, the Russian forces on the east bank of the Dnieper River were more affected by this than the Ukrainian forces, so the Ukrainians must have done it. That is a logical way of thinking that is alien to the Russian military. The Russian military doesn't really care about its own people, and it doesn't really care about the consequences of destruction. It is really acting out of a bit of desperation now, trying to retain whatever positions they have. And it leaves little doubt in my mind that they were responsible both for mining the bridge a long time ago when they first took it, and then detonating it when we saw that happen last week. I think as far as where this goes from now, we have seen, even with the probing attacks that the Ukrainians are making, some successes in recapturing some villages. This may have taken everybody, both the Ukrainians and the Russians, by surprise. And I think the Ukrainians are going to keep this up a little bit in order to see where the best opportunity would be for a harder or a more full-scale push through the front lines at some point, or maybe in a couple of points. We'll see that play out over the course of the summer. So I'll pause there.
Thank you very much. Again, lots to pick up on. I would once again invite people to post questions to the chat, sli.do/CPA. But for the moment, Hanna, let me come back to you. As Kurt was saying, and as you said, there are military consequences to this. They're not catastrophic. But sticking with that, is this, to your understanding, something obviously that Ukraine would have wanted to avoid and would rather have not see Russia do? But it must have been somehow within the calculations that Russia could do this. Would this have been something for which Ukraine would have had contingency plans militarily or otherwise?
Probably to respond to your question, we need to return back to April previous year, because the dam originally been mined, and the first information about mining it we received back in April 2022, because the Nova Kakhovka was one of the first places being occupied back in the end of February, and it's been under the effective control since then. So that was the first intention of the Russian Federation, already to have these slow bomb made from the hydroelectric stations. Then after Kherson city was liberated, and Kherson is just across of Nova Kakhovka, in autumn 2022, we received the additional information that Russia, and that is not the intelligence information, because Russia's been openly posing and talking about this, that they mined even more the pillars of the hydroelectric station, of the dam, so to prevent and to threaten Ukrainian forces from further counteroffensive. Because that time, considering how quickly or perceived quickly the counteroffensive happened in Kherson city itself, so definitely Russians been expecting that the counteroffensive will continue on the south. The winter weather prevented us, because the soil around that region is not very stable. It's necessary to be very dry for the heavy equipment. So that's why by spring, that being constant expectation from the Russian side that the certain offense should start there. We monitored their social networks, and when they've been discussing where Ukrainians should counteroffensive, they were not speaking about Melitopol, for example. Definitely, they spoke about Bakhmut a lot, but they talk a lot about Kherson region. So Nova Kakhovka became that first line of defense for them. That's why when the talks within the last 2 weeks started to intensify about the possible counteroffensive from Ukrainian side, that was all this media booze, expert booze, that when finally it is starting, we understand that the Russians became panicking. And they needed to use any type of the forces, how to prevent Ukrainians to have three big counteroffensives, east, center, and the southwest. And here, at least my speculation can be that originally they were not planning a big boom. That's something of the miscalculations, because a lot of their defense positions also being flooded. That the idea probably was to make a small hole, quite a small hole, yep. So to have a certain flood. Why? Because just in the middle of the Dnieper River, we have a small islands, and these small islands being occupied by the Ukrainian armed forces. So Russians wanted to flood these small islands, so to prevent Ukrainians from adjusting closer to have any type of the sabotage operation or coming closer to the right bank of the river. However, the situation happened as usually with the Russian forces. The planning is not going with the implementation in the same way. And they exaggerated their forces over there, and we have this war crime as for now. So that's why, from the Ukrainian point of view, partially we've been prepared for this, for sure, because when you have the whole year such critical infrastructure objects being heavily mined, definitely you are expecting the certain type of the explosion or even the incident. You also should be ready for this. Could we contain it? Could we do something to prevent it? Unfortunately not, because we couldn't demine it. Yes, it's not that we could use some kind of the air defense system or any other type of the system, because what the engineers are saying that most of these mines, it was underwater. So in the positions where we couldn't reach if we are not at the territory of the hydroelectric station and the dam. That's why most of the plans being to save the forces, Ukrainian armed forces, for them to be ready in case the water is going up, to evacuate from there, and to have plan B, how to proceed with the deoccupation of these territories in case this tragedy is coming, and in case this route through the Dnieper River is becoming closed for that.
Thank you. Olya, for you, a couple of questions, including some coming from the chat. One, you mentioned, right, that there are ongoing and potentially increasing ecological issues being caused by the flood, and the potential for more to come with the nuclear power plant, and other issues. Is there any space, is there any opportunity to actually begin some reconstruction and remediation, obviously not of the dam itself, but to begin to address some of these problems, or is the fact of war just going to make that impossible? And then the second question from the chat is, given that these are issues that affect the Black Sea as a whole, is there any evidence that some of the Black Sea littoral states, you mentioned Romania, Bulgaria, potentially Turkey, obviously NATO allies, are stepping up and providing assistance?
Thank you so much. Well, the first question is, there is too early to talk about any reconstruction or rebuilding the Kakhovka Dam or the irrigation systems, as we have war there at the area, and active fighting zone. So there is no chance to do that in the nearest future until the victory of Ukraine. And also we'll need a huge amount of money and help and technologies to build another dam, because the Kakhovka Dam is not available to be renewed. So I'd say it's too early to talk about that now. We have to focus on eliminating the consequences we have now, and to think about what we can do to minimize the effects, the negative effects, what is doing in Ukraine and in southern Ukraine particularly, and in the Black Sea. Because also, as Hanna said, there were a lot of mines there, they are still floating down the stream and into the Black Sea. We're now facing furniture, dead animals, houses coming coming up to Odessa coast. So why not the weapons and mines should not come to it also? And we all know that the Black Sea is full of mines already because of the floating Russian mines and possibly Ukrainian mines that were set up on the coast at the beginning of the war in the previous times. So we have to focus on that now. Plus we have we'll have another economical issue with constantly damaging the river transportation system in Ukraine, which is connected also to Romanian transportation system through Danube River. Ukraine has done a lot of work with deepening its part of Danube River to increase the river cargo transportation, probably to add some possibilities for Ukrainian grain export through the river waterways, as we are very limited with our sea waterways. But now it's even hard to talk about which harvest can we export now in the nearest few years. And the second question, it happened very unexpected for a lot of countries. So some NGOs and some private people, they are helping from all over the world. They're sending boats and technologies, people, and humanitarian aid to Kherson region. But we would like to hear more support and more actions from our colleagues from other countries, and especially from politicians of our allies from Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, as they are our closest neighbors in the Black Sea region. And we all will share the consequences of this in the nearest future.
Thank you. And indeed, Ambassador Volker, this has been compared to the detonation of a weapon of mass destruction, a slow-motion nuclear attack as well, given the issues with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Has the Western response, in your view, been adequate to the scale of the challenge?
No, certainly not adequate. And the first thing that I think has been missing from the Western government commentary is that they are not comfortable saying that Russia is to blame here. And I don't understand why. They're trying to say, oh, we have to investigate. It could have been the Ukrainians, could have been the Russians, and we have to find out what really happened. And in my view, that's kind of nonsense, because the only reason why this dam was blown up was because of Russian forces inside Ukraine and attacking Ukraine. That if Russia had not attacked Ukraine last year and mined this thing, it would never have happened. So it's clear that this is Russia's responsibility. And then second, there are two things that I think are missing also from the Western response. One of them is a much greater emphasis on exactly the issues that Olga was talking about, the long-term human, environmental, ecological consequences, that this is really as you put it, Sam, like a weapon of mass destruction. That is something that should get more attention, and there ought to be more an immediate response to that. I think people are overly intimidated by the war itself to realize that they could be acting more to respond to this today. Ukraine is a sovereign country that is peaceful in most places, not on the front lines, and there's more that could be done. And then the second thing I think that they should be doing as well is issuing a warning, because there's more that Russia could do. And it could be the Zaporizhzhia power plant, it could be another, it could be things that we haven't imagined. And so to warn Russia as well that things like this will elicit a direct response. They cannot go about committing war crimes like this unchallenged. I think all of those things should be part of the Western response.
I want to pick up on that last point. Also, one of the participants in the chat asked, essentially, are there other vulnerabilities? Are there other aspects of critical infrastructure, other things that the Russians are holding that, given what's been done at Nova Kakhovka, that we might expect them to weaponize in the future? Essentially, maybe Hanna, I'll put this to you: are there things that that we should be paying attention to now that we've seen this happen at the dam?
First of all, we see that the Russian forces don't have any limits. We knew it before, but now we are just having additional proofs for this. So it means that any object of the critical infrastructure doesn't mean will it influence or impact or affect their own forces or not, can be the potential bomb just for the sake of a certain moment. And unfortunately, we already have news from other directions. For example, in the Donetsk region, just yesterday, a small dam was also destroyed. We heard that several other small dams are prepared for explosions in the Zaporizhzhia region, that the mining is happening there. So it means that Russia saw the result, and because they are not sure in their line of defense, and understanding that their network of their rivers and of the dams is quite widespread in that part of the country where they are occupied and where their first line of defense is happening. So they're preparing them for the further possible action. And it means that we have all these potential crises, potential incidents that can happen. But also that means that we're on the high risk with the other types of the critical infrastructure, not only electric stations, hydroelectric stations, but I would pay attention to the plants with the potentially hazardous materials on them. As Olya already spoke about the Titan, we know, and that is quite a dangerous place in Crimea in terms of the amount of the hazardous materials that is stored there. But also, if you go to the territory of the Zaporizhzhia region, that is heavy metallurgy enterprises there. So you have a lot of the hazardous materials there, some of them in the storages, some of them as the wasted potential, some of them because of the manufacturing. And all of these places are becoming these slow motion bombs in case of the necessity, because more and more we see the Russian forces making their bases either nearby, understanding that Ukraine will not be able to shell these territories heavily, like Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Yes, it's not to control the energy production. It is because of the nuclear potential and because you understand that Ukrainian armed forces will not use HIMARS against the territory of the Zaporizhzhia power plant. But everybody's thinking about the engines and the nuclear potential, but nobody's thinking that the territory around in Energodar is also full of the hazardous waters of all those tanks with the water that have been cooling the procedures. So that is also dangerous places in case the big explosion is happening. So all those places, unfortunately, we're speaking about hundreds of them at the occupied territories that can be used potentially by the Russian Federation. And if you see that there are a lot of Russian forces there, it doesn't mean that this place is safer. As it's happened with Nova Kakhovka, the videos of the Russians trying to swim or to find any types of the boats because or sitting on the trees because they were not notified by their own commanders about the possible explosion and flooding is clearly demonstrating that it doesn't mean at all. Plus, a lot of these places are heavy mined with the with the landmines or with the how it's called in English, the mines against the landing operations, anti-platoon mines. And now, after the flooding of Kakhovka, we see plenty of them coming to Odessa coast. So that is 140 kilometers. And we now have all of these coming to our territory. So it means that any places, any districts that been mined with these types of the ammunition by the Russian Federation in the Zaporizhzhia region are also becoming dangerous places because you can make either the explosion of them to prevent the forces coming, Or in case any type of the flooding or anywhere like this happening, you have these additional risks coming both to the civilian and to military.
Thank you for that. We've talked about the nuclear power plant a bit, and it's probably worth spending a moment on that. There have been conflicting messages. Obviously, there are very real things to worry about. It's also been said that there is, given that most of the reactors are not active, that there are that there doesn't seem to be an immediate risk. I wonder if anybody can shed some light on that. Kurt, you've.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things, and again, Hanna and Olga may know even more, but one of them is that the cooling ponds that are there are still needed to keep the reactor in an idle state. And they are not immediately affected by the flood, but their replenishment may be affected by the removal of the water from behind the dam. So this is it's a potential problem that may tick out over a couple of months, but it's something really to watch. The second is that my understanding is that the Russians have actually armed or mined the power plant and reactors itself, so that they could blow it up at any time if they want, or if Ukraine is recapturing the territory, they could blow it up remotely as well. This is also something that is horrendous. Third is the IAEA is still there. They're talking about people not responding to the humanitarian crisis below in the flooded area below the dam. The IAEA is on the ground at the power plant and keeping an eye on things. It is shut down and stable for now, but it is a very tenuous situation. And then finally, the Russians have not been allowing the Ukrainian staff of the power plant to operate normally. Everything from long shifts and fatigue to being put under Russian supervision where the Russians don't know what they're doing. There are a lot of problems in the way it is now being managed that also present risks.
Thank you. One other question coming from the chat. I'll open this up to anybody who wants to answer it. It says several panel members mentioned that Ukraine will not be able to assault across the river for some period of time. Do we have any idea what that period of time might be?
Maybe
it definitely depends on weather a lot. You need to understand that for water just to go down, the expected time is around 2 weeks. But that is for the normal average conditions. Unfortunately, since yesterday, we have also heavy rains in Kherson and around, so the whole south is under heavy rains, and it gives additional difficulty to these because it doesn't allow sun to dry the land. And the most important is to dry the land because this land is like a muddy type, so you really need to make it dry to be able for the proper movement in case you need it. We see that at the certain places, the water is going down quicker than maybe expected for the good. But the conditions there, it's not only water that we need to get out, it's not only dry land that we need, but also the destroyed road infrastructure. If you see the videos from there, there are a lot of roads that because of these floods and mud and everything, currently either just with the destroyed concrete, so most of the machinery will not be able to move there, or it is full of the other objects. So if up to Odessa, we have the whole refrigerators coming with the floods, you can imagine what type of the objects are close to Kherson city. So there are parts of houses there. Yesterday, by the way, we had the half of the house and the roof being in Odessa. And that is here. So what is in all those territories around, it is more and more of these destroyed houses and different buildings around. And that's also the things that are making it more problematic, plus those mines. That's also something that we cannot say with the time what the armed forces will need to check the roads before driving there. Because even if not the mine sweeper operation, but at least a certain unit coming in front and checking that you can drive the roads, that there are no all of these type of the hidden mines over there, because we are speaking about quite a small object, starting from the butterfly of this type to the 3 liters types of the mine that can be there. So it's not something that you drive and you suddenly see and you can easily pass by. You really need to check for safety reasons the roads you are going to drive.
Thank you. We've got about a minute and a half left, so I'll give people a little bit of time just to wrap up with final thoughts on things that our audience should be paying attention to in the days and weeks ahead in relation to Nova Kakhovka and the whole complex of issues that we have been discussing. Maybe we'll go in reverse order. So, Kurt, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think the only thing I would flag for people as they look ahead over the next couple of weeks is that the international community is going to be getting together in London for the Ukraine Recovery Conference, be a high-level focal point. And it is an opportunity for international donors to come up with ways to present, talk about, and then follow up on to actually assist Ukraine in dealing with the consequences of the flood, which of course will be important for rebuilding and strengthening Ukraine's economic recovery.
That's a good point. Olya.
Yes, I'd say that in a couple of weeks, when the water will come down, become lower, we will see the whole field of the work we should do, and that will be more clear in our plans and visions on it. Also, we should take all our occupied territories back before doing anything, because we can't rebuild anything during the active fighting actions. So as well, for this, we need a huge assistance from our allies and our friends through all over the world. We're very thankful for everything the world is doing for us, and that you are standing with us. But please don't give up, and keep staying with us in this hard times, because it's not about just Ukraine, it's about the whole democracy, values, European security, food security, and much more.
Well put. And last word, Hanna, is yours.
I would say that let's follow the consequences of this tragedy, both in terms of the short term and the long term, because we would have more and more of the long term consequences as well. Now, for the short term consequences, it's not only that humanitarian aid, additional humanitarian aid that Ukraine unfortunately needs, starting from the restoration of the fresh water supply to the huge amount of the territories that now is lacking it. And we're speaking about territories up to Korbut. To the restoration of the houses for the people that need to return there, but also the pressing Russia and the United Nations of evacuating people from the left bank, from the occupied territories. We asked the United Nations, they tried, but Russia still didn't allow the United Nations specialists to come there and to help people with evacuation. But when we are speaking about the long-term consequences, here we will need a lot of the expertise, because we are already discussing not only restoration of the social economic life of the region because of this, but also about environmental consequences. And now we hear a lot of the discussions about Black Sea, what to do there, what consequences it will have, but also about the restoration of the dam itself. There are two big opinions, and more expertise, more discussions will be needed. One is said that we need to restore, so to have the agriculture being for that region again efficient. But we already have more and more of environmental opinion saying that before 1950s we didn't have any dam, and that this dam and this environment is not natural for these territories, and we need to return back to the original, what was safer and more natural for these territories. So that's why we already need to start thinking about these long-term consequences that will have both the environmental and social economic importance for the region.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but only for now. There will be a lot more to talk about and to discuss. Please do stay tuned to SIPA at sipa.org and on all of your social media channels. Please join me in thanking Ambassador Volker, Olya Korbut, and Dr. Shelest. And thank you to all of you for tuning in from around the world. Stay safe, stay well, and stay with us. Bye.